April the 3rd, 1933, Maple Leaf Gardens. 15,493 fans in the stands. The largest crowd ever to watch a hockey event in the history of Canada. Some said it was a record that would never be broken. Now, the Maple Leafs, they had their veteran players with the team. Primo, the guy who'd sliced his foot open, he was on the bench, but he was white as a sheet. He wasn't going to be playing much that night. They'd even brought Bailey back. They'd taken his bandages and twisted them around this way so they could hold a stick in his arm and play a little bit. But he wasn't going to be much use. So skating out to center ice, they called on a young rookie to take the place. It was my uncle, Charlie Sands. He skated out to take that opening face-off. They'd moved him to the first line. They'd moved him from right wing to center. And the game started. Let's try that again. Hello, Canada! And hockey fans in the United States and Newfoundland. This is Foster Hewitt coming to you from the gondola high above Maple Leaf Gardens. We've played 60 minutes of hockey. Not a single goal has been scored. Both teams are playing a tight defensive style. This could be a long night. And so it was true. In contrast to that previous game, which had been wide open and hard-hitting, both teams took a defensive stance right off the start of this game. They played a style known as kitty bar the door, sort of a precursor to what we call the trap today, when the forwards move back to the defense and block the way so people can't get in close to the net. All the shots were coming from 10, 20 feet out, and nobody was scoring. Hello, Canada, hockey fans in the United States and Newfoundland. Foster Hewitt from the gondola high above Maple Leaf Gardens. We have played 3 overtime periods of hockey, and both teams are not getting in to get a shot. I don't know when this game is going to end. And so it was. They'd played 3 overtime periods of hockey, 6 periods of hockey since the game began, 120 minutes on the ice back and forth, and not a single goal. The crowd started forming around Maple Leaf Gardens. People were hearing about this on the radio. They knew something was happening, and they started going out there, and the radios were turned on so they could listen to it out on the streets. After midnight, the newspapers started printing special editions. Charlie would have been one of the players sitting in between periods reading about the game that he was playing in that still hadn't finished yet. It was still tied 0-0. And the players played and the goalies saved and the night went on and on. Over 2 days, history was made. Boy, that game was long. It was the night of the longest game. Now, shortly into the 4th overtime period, they beat the record for the longest game that was ever been played. And they played on and on until they'd played 5 overtime periods of hockey, 8 full periods of hockey since the beginning of the game, 160 minutes of hockey on the ice. It was after 1 in the morning, and they knew something had to happen. You see, I told you this was the semifinal round. The final round, the Stanley Cup final, was scheduled to begin in New York City the following night. At Union Station in Toronto, there was a train all geared up and fired up and ready and waiting to go to take the winner straight down to New York so that they could play in that game the next night. But the game was not ending. So Conn Smythe, the owner of the Maple Leafs, and Art Ross, the manager of the Boston Bruins, they knew something had to happen. These two guys hated each other. They couldn't stand each other. They got in this meeting room with the president of the NHL, and they figured something had to happen. They couldn't figure out what to do. Maybe they could pull both goalies and have wide open nets, and that would decide it. After lots of discussion, they thought, well, we're just going to have to go out to center ice and flip a coin. And this was agreed to on one condition, that the players on both teams would go along with it. So Art Ross goes into the Boston dressing room, and Boston, well, you know, what would Boston say? They agreed to it. Can you believe that? What a bunch of wimps! But Smythe goes into the Toronto dressing room, and the players say, "No way! We're going to decide this on the ice! Let's go out there and keep playing!" And so it was that they started the 6th overtime period of hockey at 1:30 in the morning. Hello, Canada. Foster Hewitt, coming to you from the gondola, high above Maple Leaf Garden. We've played 164 minutes of hockey. It's 1:40 in the morning. I'm a little tired. Now Eddie Shore, he's got the puck. He moves it forward. He's going to clear it out of his zone. Oh, but wait. It's intercepted by Blair. Blair takes the puck. He passes it to Doherty. Who the heck is Doherty? Doherty takes 2 steps. He shoots. He scores. 14,593 people stood silent, staring at the puck in the net over the red line. The only way that 14,593 people can stare after they've been watching 164 minutes and 32 seconds of hockey. They were in a trance. They looked at the puck. They looked at the players. The players looked at each other. The players looked at the ref. Everybody looked at this new invention, the red light, right in behind the screen, and the red light was on. All of a sudden, the crowd erupted in cheers. I said, let's try that again. All of a sudden, the crowd erupted. Whoa! Yeah! They started throwing their programs, tearing off their scarves, throwing their mitts and their hats and their coats. The air was filled with litter and debris raining down on the ice. One of the Toronto players, Baldy Cotton, he starts picking up the hats and puts them in a big pile, and he sticks them on top of his head, and he does a little Irish jig in the middle of the ice. King Clancy skates over to Art Ross, the manager of the Boston Bruins, and he kisses him straight out on the mouth. And Ross laughed. Everybody was giddy with excitement. Doherty dove into the net. He pilled that puck up. He was going to hold that for the rest of his life. And the players mobbed him and grabbed him and almost tore him apart, carrying him into the dressing room. After he got dressed, he came out, and the fans, they mobbed him, grabbed him, pulled him up on their shoulders, and they carried him all the way down to Union Station. Now, Ken Doherty was a pretty good hockey player, but he was only 5'2". He just wasn't big enough, and he'd come up about the same time as Charlie. In fact, they might have competed for that right wing spot. He didn't do much before that night. He didn't do much after that night. But on the morning of April the 4th, 1933, Ken Doherty was the king of Toronto. The next day, the papers said they were commenting on the fact that Eddie Shore had made a mistake that had led to the goal. The runt had bested the king. So Toronto took off 3:30 in the morning for New York City to play for the Stanley Cup final. They didn't get in till late the next afternoon. They played that night. Didn't turn out so well. They were dead tired. They lost that game. In fact, they went on and they lost the series 3-1. In that last game, Bailey got hit hard into the boards again. Ow! They tore him off screaming. Ow! Ow! It was his knee. He'd broken his kneecap and torn some ligaments, and he was in excruciating pain. Had a long rehab that year. But despite the disappointing result, one thing had happened. Charlie Sands had made his way into the NHL. He'd be back the next season.